The train whistle pierced the dawn air as it pulled into Sweetwater Junction, Wyoming Territory, 1885. Hannah Reed clutched her worn carpetbag with trembling fingers, her other hand instinctively rising to touch the purple bruise blooming around her left eye. She flinched at her own touch, memories of Philadelphia still too fresh, too painful. The small frontier town sprawled before her, nothing like the crowded city streets she'd fled. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she spotted a tall figure waiting on the platform, hat in hand. This was him, the man whose advertisement she'd answered, the man who would become her husband. Adam Yates shifted his weight from one boot to the other, scanning the few passengers disembarking. When his eyes fell on Hannah, recognition flickered across his weathered face, followed by something darker as he noticed the bruise marring her delicate features. He crossed the platform in long strides, stopping a respectful distance away. "Miss Reed?" he asked, his voice deep but gentle. Hannah nodded, attempting a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mr. Yates." Adam's jaw tightened as he took in the full extent of her injury. His next words came out low and fierce. "Tell me who did this." Hannah's breath caught. In his eyes, she saw not the pity she dreaded, but a protective anger that made her heart skip. Still, she couldn't bring herself to answer, not yet. Instead, she glanced down at the dust coating her travel-worn boots. "I'd rather not discuss it here," she whispered. "Please." Adam studied her for a long moment before nodding once. He reached for her bag, careful not to touch her. "My wagon's this way. Let's get you somewhere you can rest." The ride to Adam's ranch passed in relative silence. Hannah stole glances at the man beside her, tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. His hands, calloused and strong, held the reins with easy confidence. Nothing like Richard's soft, manicured hands that could turn so cruel. "It's not much," Adam said as they crested a hill, breaking her reverie. Below them stretched a modest ranch, a sturdy two-story house, a large barn, corrals filled with horses and cattle grazing on the surrounding grassland. "But it's mine, paid off last year." "It's beautiful," Hannah said honestly, taking in the wildflowers dotting the prairie and the mountains rising in the distance. For the first time in months, she felt something like hope. Adam helped her down from the wagon with respectful hands that never lingered. Inside, the house was simple but clean, with handcrafted furniture and colorful quilts adding warmth. "My mother's room is yours now," he said, showing her to a sunlit bedroom. "I've been using the one across the hall since she passed last winter." Hannah set her bag on the bed, suddenly aware of the awkwardness of their situation. "Mr. Yates, Adam," he corrected gently. "Adam, I understand if you wish to void our agreement." Her hand rose unconsciously to her bruised face. "I'm not exactly what you advertised for." Adam leaned against the doorframe, his expression unreadable. "I advertised for a woman of good character willing to work alongside me to build something worthwhile. Nothing I've seen suggests you're not that woman." "You don't know me," she whispered. "I'd like to," he replied simply. "But first, I think you need to rest. We can talk at supper." True to his word, Adam gave her space. Hannah unpacked her few belongings and washed away the grime of travel before lying down. Despite her exhaustion, sleep eluded her. Instead, she found herself listening to the sounds of Adam moving about the house, steady footsteps, the clatter of pots, the door opening and closing as he went about his chores. By supper time, Hannah had composed herself enough to join Adam at the table. He'd prepared a simple but hearty meal of beans, cornbread, and surprisingly tender beef. "You cook well," she observed, breaking the silence. A smile tugged at his lips. "Had to learn after Ma died. Before that, I mostly burned everything." Hannah found herself smiling back. "I could teach you more if you like. Cooking was one of my duties in." She stopped abruptly. Adam set down his fork. "In your previous household?" Hannah nodded, her appetite suddenly gone. "Hannah," he said softly, "I won't press you to tell me what happened. But I want you to know that whoever put their hands on you won't do so again, not while I'm breathing." Tears stung Hannah's eyes. It was my former employer, she admitted, the words tumbling out. I worked as a governess for a wealthy family in Philadelphia. The master of the house, he took liberties. When I refused his advances, he became violent. Adam's knuckles whitened around his fork. Did you report him? Hannah laughed bitterly. To whom? His word against mine, a mere employee. His wife wouldn't believe me. The police certainly wouldn't, so I ran. She looked up, meeting his gaze. I saw your advertisement in the newspaper, a rancher seeking a bride. It seemed like providence or desperation, Adam said bluntly but without cruelty. Perhaps both, Hannah acknowledged. I had $23 to my name and nowhere to go. Adam pushed his plate away, his expression thoughtful. Hannah, I want to be clear about something. The agreement we made through our letters, it stands if you want it to, but I won't hold you to marrying me right away. We can wait, get to know each other properly. But the preacher can wait, Adam finished firmly. We told folks you were coming as my bride, but we never specified when the ceremony would be. No one will think anything of it if we court proper like first. Relief washed over Hannah, followed by a wave of gratitude so intense it threatened to overwhelm her. Thank you, she managed. Adam nodded once. Now eat your supper before it gets cold. Tomorrow's another day. The following weeks established a routine. Hannah rose early to prepare breakfast, then spent her days learning the workings of the ranch. Adam taught her to gather eggs without upsetting the hens, to milk the ornery cow that had a tendency to kick, and to identify the herbs growing wild in the kitchen garden his mother had planted years before. In turn, Hannah transformed the house. She mended curtains, polished neglected furniture, and filled mason jars with wildflowers. Meals became more varied as she put her cooking skills to use, delighting in Adam's appreciative groans when he tasted her apple pie or fried chicken. As her black eye faded to a yellowish shadow, Hannah found herself healing in other ways. The nightmares came less frequently. She stopped flinching when Adam moved suddenly. And gradually, she began to see the ranch not as a refuge but as a home. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Adam cleared his throat. Town dance is Saturday, he said casually. Thought you might like to go. Hannah glanced at him, surprised. Won't people talk? We've been living together for nearly a month without being married. Adam shrugged. Let them. Most folks understand you needed time to settle in. Besides, he added with a half smile, Mrs. Peterson from the Mercantile has been asking after you. Says she's curious about the woman who finally caught confirmed bachelor Adam Yates. Hannah laughed a real laugh that bubbled up from somewhere deep inside her. And what did you tell her? That she'd have to meet you herself to find out what kind of special you are. Heat crept into Hannah's cheeks at his words. Over the weeks, she'd noticed things about Adam, the way the corner of his eyes crinkled when he smiled, how gentle his hands could be when treating an injured calf, the deep rumble of his voice when he sang softly to his horses. Dangerous things to notice about a man she wasn't certain she would marry. I'd like to go, she said softly. I haven't danced in a long time. Then it's settled, Adam replied, his eyes reflecting the dying sunlight. It's a date. Saturday arrived clear and warm. Hannah spent extra time on her appearance, wearing her best dress, a cornflower blue that brought out the gold flecks in her hazel eyes, and arranging her chestnut hair in a style more elaborate than her usual practical bun. When she descended the stairs, Adam stood waiting in the parlor, dressed in a clean shirt and vest, his usually unruly hair slicked down with water. He stared at her with an expression that made her pulse quicken. You look beautiful, he said simply. Thank you. She smoothed her hands over her skirt, suddenly shy. You look quite handsome yourself. The town hall was decorated with paper lanterns and wildflowers. A small band played lively tunes in the corner, and the wooden floor was already crowded with dancing couples. Hannah felt curious gazes following them as Adam led her inside, his hand a reassuring presence at the small of her back. Adam Yates, a plump woman in a purple dress approached, eyes bright with curiosity. This must be your mail-order bride we've all been hearing about, Mrs. Peterson. Adam nodded politely. May I present Miss Hannah Reed? Hannah, this is Beatrice Peterson, who runs the mercantile and knows everything about everyone within 50 miles. Flatterer. Mrs. Peterson swatted his arm before turning her attention to Hannah. Welcome to Sweetwater Junction, my dear. We've been wondering when Adam would bring you to town. I've been settling in, Hannah explained, learning the ways of ranch life. And how do you find it? Different from city living, I imagine. Vastly, Hannah admitted with a smile. But I prefer it. There's an honesty to the work here. Mrs. Peterson's eyes softened. Well, you're welcome anytime at the store. We ladies have a sewing circle on Tuesdays. Nothing fancy, just an excuse to gossip without the men overhearing. Before Hannah could respond, the band struck up a waltz. Adam touched her elbow lightly. May I have this dance, Miss Reed? With pleasure, Mr. Yates, she replied, allowing him to lead her to the floor. Adam proved to be a surprisingly graceful dancer, guiding her with confidence through the steps. Hannah relaxed into his arms, aware of the solid strength of his shoulder beneath her hand, the clean scent of soap and leather that clung to him. Everyone's watching us, she murmured. Let them, Adam replied, his voice low near her ear. They're just jealous I've got the prettiest girl at the dance. Hannah's heart fluttered at his words. You don't have to say such things. There's no one to impress here. Adam's steps faltered slightly as he looked down at her, his expression serious. I'm not trying to impress anyone, Hannah. I'm just speaking the truth as I see it. The sincerity in his eyes stole her breath. For a moment, they weren't dancing in a crowded hall but floating in a world of their own, connected by more than just their clasped hands. The spell broke when the music ended. Adam reluctantly released her, and they joined the applause for the musicians. As the evening progressed, Hannah met more of the townsfolk, the blacksmith and his boisterous wife, the quiet schoolteacher, the young doctor who'd arrived just 6 months earlier. Most were welcoming, though Hannah noticed a few women eyeing her with barely concealed disapproval. At one point, while Adam fetched them punch, she overheard a sharp-faced woman whispering to her companion. Living together for weeks without being properly married. In my day, that would have been considered scandalous. Now, Harriet, her friend replied, times are different out here. And you know how hard it's been for Adam since his parents passed. Hannah pretended not to hear, but the words stung. When Adam returned, he must have sensed her discomfort. Ready to head home? He asked quietly. Hannah nodded gratefully. The ride back to the ranch was silent, but not uncomfortably so. The night air was cool, stars scattered like diamonds across the vast Wyoming sky. Hannah felt Adam's occasional glances but kept her own eyes on the heavens. I'm sorry if tonight was difficult, he said finally. Small towns can be judgmental, Hannah supplied. Adam's mouth quirked. I was going to say curious, but that works too. It doesn't matter, Hannah said, though they both knew it wasn't entirely true. I had a lovely time dancing with you. When they reached the ranch, Adam helped her down from the wagon, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than necessary. In the silver moonlight, his features were cast in shadow, but Hannah could feel the intensity of his gaze. Hannah, he began, then paused as if searching for words. I've been thinking. Her heart thumped painfully against her ribs. Yes. Would you consider making our arrangement official, not right away, he added hastily, but soon. I find myself wanting to introduce you as Mrs. Yates, not Miss Reed. Hannah's breath caught. This was what she'd come west for: security, a home, a husband. Adam was kind and hardworking. Many women would consider themselves fortunate to marry such a man, yet something held her back. Adam, I care for you deeply, she began carefully. These weeks here have meant more to me than I can express, but you're not in love with me, he finished, his voice flat. I don't know what I feel, Hannah admitted. After what happened in Philadelphia, I'm afraid to trust my own heart. Adam stepped back, creating distance between them. I understand, he said, though disappointment shadowed his face. The offer stands whenever you're ready, if you're ever ready. That night, Hannah lay awake long after the house fell silent. She thought of Adam's hands, gentle and strong, of his quiet laugh when she'd managed to lasso her first calf, of the way his eyes softened when he looked at her across the supper table. Was that love growing between them? Or was she merely grateful to a man who'd offered her safety when she most needed it? The answer eluded her. Even as dawn began to lighten the sky, life on the ranch continued. Adam never mentioned marriage again, but Hannah caught him watching her sometimes with an expression that made her wonder if she'd made a mistake. They worked side by side, their bodies falling into natural rhythms, anticipating each other's movements, passing tools without needing to speak, finishing each other's sentences. Summer turned to early autumn. The days grew shorter, the mornings crisp with the promise of winter to come. Hannah planted a late garden and began putting up preserves for the cold months ahead. Adam mended fences and prepared the livestock for the changing seasons. They existed in a comfortable limbo, neither married nor courting, yet bound together by something deeper than either label could express. One evening in late September, Adam rode out to check on a section of fence that had been giving him trouble. "I won't be long," he promised, already swinging into the saddle. Hours passed. Supper grew cold on the table. Unease crept into Hannah's bones as full dark settled over the ranch. She lit a lantern and hung it from the porch post as a beacon, then paced the length of the porch, straining to hear hoofbeats in the distance. Nothing. By midnight, fear had sunk its claws deep. Hannah knew the dangers of the territory: sudden storms, wild animals, bandits. Adam was experienced, but accidents happened. She couldn't sit idle any longer. Changing into her sturdiest clothes, Hannah saddled Biscuit, the gentle mare Adam had been teaching her to ride. She packed a small bag with bandages and whiskey for medicinal purposes, slipped Adam's spare revolver into her pocket, and set out in the direction he'd gone. The night was clear but moonless, the stars offering just enough light to follow the trail. Hannah kept Biscuit at a steady walk, scanning the terrain for any sign of Adam or his mount. Her heart pounded painfully in her chest, a litany of prayers cycling through her mind. Please let him be alive. Please let me find him. Please, God, don't take him from me too. It was nearly dawn when she spotted something, a dark shape huddled against an outcropping of rocks. As she drew closer, relief and horror warred within her. Adam lay on the ground, his horse nowhere in sight, blood darkening his shirt. Hannah dismounted so quickly she nearly fell, rushing to kneel beside him. "Adam," she cried, hands hovering over his still form, his eyelids fluttered. "Hannah." His voice was weak, disbelieving. "What are you doing out here?" "Looking for you," she replied, already examining his injuries. A deep gash ran along his side and his right leg was bent at an unnatural angle. "What happened?" "Rattlesnake spooked Thunderhead," Adam grimaced as Hannah carefully lifted his shirt. "Threw me hard, think my leg's broken, couldn't walk back." "Why didn't you fire your gun?" "I would have heard, lost it in the fall," he admitted. "Crawled as far as I could before the pain got too bad." Hannah worked quickly, cleaning and binding his wound as best she could. The gash was deep but had mostly stopped bleeding. The broken leg worried her more. It needed to be set properly. "We need to get you to town," she said, thinking of the young doctor. "Can you ride if I help you up?" Adam's face was gray with pain, but he nodded. No choice. Getting him onto Biscuit was an ordeal that left them both sweating and Adam barely conscious. Hannah mounted behind him, holding him steady with one arm around his waist while she guided the horse with her other hand. The journey to town was agonizingly slow. Adam drifted in and out of consciousness, occasionally murmuring deliriously. Hannah caught fragments: her name, something about cattle prices, and once, so softly she nearly missed it, "Love you." Her arms tightened around him. "Stay with me, Adam," she whispered fiercely. "Just stay with me." By the time they reached Sweetwater Junction, the town was stirring to life. Hannah rode straight to the doctor's home, calling out for help as they approached. Dr. Miller emerged in his nightshirt, took one look at Adam, and shouted for his assistant. The next hours passed in a blur. Hannah paced outside the treatment room while the doctor set Adam's leg and stitched his wound. When she was finally allowed to see him, Adam lay pale but stable on a narrow bed, his leg splinted and bandaged. "He's lucky," Dr. Miller told her quietly. "Another few hours out there and infection would have set in. You saved his life, Mrs. Yates." Hannah didn't correct him. Instead, she pulled a chair to Adam's bedside and took his hand between both of hers. "When can I take him home?" "Not for a few days at least." "That leg needs to be watched, and he's lost a fair amount of blood." Hannah nodded. "Then I'll stay here with him." For 3 days, Hannah barely left Adam's side. She slept in the chair beside his bed, sponged his fever-warm brow, and coaxed broth between his lips when he was lucid enough to swallow. On the 4th morning, she awoke to find him watching her, his eyes clear for the first time since the accident. "You look terrible," he said, his voice hoarse but stronger. Hannah gave a watery laugh. "You're one to talk." Adam's fingers tightened around hers. "You found me." "Of course I found you," she replied, as if there had never been any other possibility. "Hannah," Adam's expression grew serious. "When I was out there, thinking I might die, I had only one regret." Hannah held her breath, afraid to hope. "That I never told you plainly how I feel," he continued. "I love you, not because you cook for me or keep my house, but because you're brave and kind and stronger than you know. Because when you smile, it feels like sunrise after the longest night." Tears spilled down Hannah's cheeks. "I thought I'd lost you," she whispered. "And that's when I knew I love you too, Adam Yates, with all my heart." Adam lifted a hand to her face, gently brushing away her tears. "Is that a yes, then? To becoming Mrs. Yates?" "It's a yes," Hannah confirmed, leaning down to press her lips to his in a tender kiss that tasted of salt and promise. They were married 2 weeks later in the small white church in Sweetwater Junction. Adam stood with the aid of crutches, his leg still healing but his spirit whole. Hannah wore a simple cream dress with wildflowers in her hair. The entire town turned out for the celebration, even sharp-faced Harriet, who sniffed disapprovingly but brought a beautiful quilt as a wedding gift. Their first months as husband and wife brought challenges. Adam's recovery was slow, and winter came early that year, harsh and unforgiving. They worked together, Hannah taking on more of the physical tasks while Adam directed operations from the porch or kitchen table, chafing at his limitations but never taking his frustration out on her. By spring, when the first wildflowers dotted the prairie, Adam's leg had healed enough for him to ride again. Hannah discovered she was expecting their first child. They celebrated with a picnic by the creek that ran through their property, making plans for the future additions to the house, expanded herds, perhaps even hired hands as the ranch grew. "Are you happy?" Adam asked as they lay side by side on the blanket, watching clouds drift across the Wyoming sky. Hannah turned to look at him, this man who had seen her bruised and broken and had offered not pity but partnership, not ownership but love. "Happier than I ever dreamed possible," she answered truthfully. 5 years later, the Yates Ranch had nearly tripled in size. Their home buzzed with the energy of 3 children: 4-year-old James, 2-year-old Elizabeth, and baby Thomas, just learning to crawl. Adam had become one of the most respected ranchers in the territory, and Hannah had established a small side business selling her preserves and baked goods in town. On their anniversary, after the children were tucked into bed, Adam presented Hannah with a small velvet box. Inside lay a delicate gold locket. "Open it," he urged. Hannah did, finding a tiny portrait of their family on one side. On the other was engraved a single date, not their wedding day as she expected, but the day she had stepped off the train in Sweetwater Junction with a black eye and a heart full of fear. "The day my life truly began," Adam explained, seeing her confusion. Hannah closed her fingers around the precious gift. "Mine too," she whispered. That night, as they lay wrapped in each other's arms, Hannah thought about the woman she had been, desperate enough to marry a stranger, brave enough to flee her past, and the woman she had become. Wife, mother, partner. Loved, The bruises of her past had faded completely, replaced by the gentle touch of a man who had seen her at her most vulnerable and had only ever asked, "Tell me who did this," so he could ensure it would never happen again. In the darkness of their bedroom, Hannah pressed a kiss to her husband's chest, right over his steadily beating heart. "I love you, Adam Yates," she murmured, his arms tightened around her. "And I love you, Hannah Yates, until my last breath and beyond." Outside their window, the vast Wyoming sky sparkled with stars, witnesses to a love that had begun with a black eye and a question, and had grown into something unbreakable, a love as enduring as the mountains and as vast as the prairie they called home.